On our broadcast tonight, melting away, there is new and dramatic evidence of what's happening to our world. Melting ice and rising seas at record levels.
What we do know is the temperature around the globe is increasing.
America does not have a comprehensive, well-stated energy policy. It has energy politics.
It's a people issue. It's an issue that's both Republican, Democratic, and independent.
I am a firm believer that climate change is real.
37% think global warming is a hoax.
There have been an extraordinarily large number of severe weather events.
3 to 6 major hurricanes. Now you can see that's well above average.
This July was the warmest month on record.
Antarctica is melting.
More ice is going into the ocean as it's speeding up.
The Arctic ice cap is melting.
344 billion metric tons of ice melting in Antarctica and Greenland a year. More than half of all Americans live within 50 miles of the coastline.
We haven't done as much as we need to.
The big question mark is the future, of course.
What more can we do?
Can you wait for the Environmental Protection Agency? Can you wait for the White House to figure this out?
Florida, America's sunshine state, complete with beautiful scenery, exciting wildlife, happy citizens, and responsible legislature. But how much of this is reality?
We have become so large in our impact on the chemistry of our atmosphere and the nature of our world that we are changing the actual character of its climate over the long term. We've seen warming that is about the same as the largest warming over the past 800,000 years, and that warming is so much more rapid. It's within 50 years, not within thousands of years, and it's that rapid change that's devastating.
We've got to invest in the issues of climate change. For one thing, Florida is a state that is extraordinarily vulnerable to the effects of climate change, storms and sea level rise. So we're investing in it whether we like it or not. What we really need to be talking about is the efforts to try and slow down the rate of climate change, which is going to happen no matter what we do, and how we're actually going to adapt to it.
If we briefly look at Florida's history of energy policy and the environment, we need to start in 1999, when Jeb Bush was governor. Although Bush was a climate change skeptic, he began his term opposing offshore oil drilling and promoting the restoration of the Everglades. In 2005, facing a tough economic period, Bush changed his stance on offshore oil drilling in order to lower the price of oil and keep the state less dependent on outside sources of energy. Taking office later in 2007, Charlie Crist formed the Florida Energy and Climate Commission to look after Florida's environment. Like Bush, Crist was originally opposed to offshore oil drilling, but then changed his policies to suit the collapsing economy.
I hope I have a reputation of wanting to protect this environment, because I do. But I also have to balance that, I think, as every citizen does, with what's happening to Florida families, what's happening to this economy, how dependent are we on foreign oil?
The following year, the BP oil spill occurred. Today, Rick Scott governs the state of Florida, and efforts toward more renewable energy initiatives to lessen the effects of climate change seem to have come to a halt.
The state legislature decided probably about a year and a half ago to make that change, to move it from within the office of the governor over to the Department of Agriculture. That was a significant change to say we need to relocate this Office of Energy, which has been in a lot of different departments since the 70s. Most recently has been working with this Climate Commission, Energy and Climate Commission, and say, let's move it out and let's move it over to the Department of Agriculture. Practically speaking, the Energy and Climate Commission really got sort of bogged down, extremely focused necessarily on the stimulus programs that came out of Washington after the election of President Obama in 2008. It was $175 million, which this state had never seen in terms of energy-related program dollars coming from Washington. So they really spent most of their time actually putting those grant programs into place. I bet you if you were talking to some of the commissioners, they'd say we never really got a chance to implement what we wanted to implement.
There was an effort about 4 years ago that we were very involved in to create a renewable portfolio standard. That's a standard for the amount of renewable energy that would be produced from solar rooftop solar and solar farms and windmills and other renewable sources. And that idea has just fallen by the wayside. Nobody's doing anything about it right now. When Governor Charlie Crist was here, he was a great proponent of doing something about climate change, sea level rise. But the new governor and the whole, what might be called the Tea Party reaction on climate change has meant that this legislature is more of a group of deniers than anything else.
We live on a dynamic, ever-changing globe. It's called the Earth.
Inevitably, the cycles of the Earth are going to overcome any artificial stuff that we do.
That ice has receded all the way up to the Arctic. Well, did it recede because the American Indians built bonfires? I don't think so. I think it receded because the Earth heats and cools. That's all.
As a dentist, you might understand I spent significant time in physics classes, chemistry classes, and biology classes. Knowing about the environment is not a foreign subject to me at all. And being able to look at a paper that is being perpetrated as scientific and see the holes in it is not something that's foreign to me either.
When you're dealing with climate change, you have to look at so many factors that are out there that you cannot sort of just rest on the latest study that comes out.
Dr. Willie Soon, an astrophysicist at Harvard, wrote a paper that shows very clearly the coordination of ocean surface temperature with solar spots activity. And the bottom line is, if you want to control global warming, learn how to control the sun.
What Hayes forgot to mention was that 4 of the leading editors of the peer-reviewed scientific journal, which the paper was a part of, resigned after it was published. The editor-in-chief, Hans von Storch, said the conclusions were not supported by the evidence presented in the paper.
The global warming hoax that has been perpetrated by Al Gore and his followers has been debunked by several credible scientists, and those people who called themselves scientists that were propagating that misinformation have been disproven time and time again. So I think that it's our responsibility to be good stewards of the environment and to just debunk the whole global warming myth.
You know, there's not really two sides of this debate at all. I mean, there's a consensus among scientists that climate change is in fact happening and it's human caused.
As you can see, the graph clearly shows the major consensus among scientists. Yet Florida legislature continues to fiddle and ignore the facts.
The big things right now are, affordable care and elections, and this is actually a physical, tangible thing that's happening that's going to affect beaches and our economy now. And you would think that would demand some attention.
I have 40 bills that I have sponsored this year, none of which have anything to do with global warming.
Knowing the 9 inches in Key West over 100 years, those are things you just can't turn your back on and say, it was a storm. There are tangible things happening right now, and we're elected for a short period of time, and it depends on what you want to do with your time here.
In this arena, I have all on my plate that I can say grace over, and if I can just take care of my little realm, I don't need to be taking care of other people's business.
But the question is what's the cost of not doing anything? And the cost of not doing anything is even greater. The cost of not doing things can be many hundreds of times our GDP. We could have complete collapse of our food system, riots, loss of civil government, and basically reversion to a hunter-gatherer society at the worst case. Now that's an extreme prediction, obviously, but failure of crops could lead to widespread starvation. We have seen widespread drought, crops are less stable. Our agricultural system and all agricultural systems are based on stability of climate. So it's happening quickly, and that's the scary thing, is the quickness of how rapidly the climate is changing.
And that's such a confusing thing to me, that if you believe that God gave you the earth, that God created the earth for you, why would you not have to look after it? Why would you not think that when he came back he wouldn't go, what the fuck did you do?
In spite of what policies are in place, some citizens, like Ed Deaton for example, find simple, inexpensive ways to reduce their energy consumption.
For instance, our electric bills are 180 to a little over 300 kilowatt hours a month, and the typical Florida home uses about 1,100 kilowatt hours a month.
Or Ivan Baggett, who uses solar panels to power his home.
So this is the inverter. This is what takes the direct current from the solar panels and converts it to AC current, and then feeds it into the electric box there and the rest of the house. Well, you know, the drive for money and success can dovetail with renewable energy, in particular solar energy, but you just have to have the right policies in place to make it happen.
I think that's the bottom line, to be able to be as sustainable as possible, because that allows you to really be connected to the things that are important to you rather than the things that are important to the economy.
I mean, you know, most people that are showing interest in solar are showing it because they want to make their huge electric bills go down. You know, not that necessarily that they want to be, you know, green and save the planet, but they're trying to save themselves some money. And there's a lot that can be done with that. It's just we have to have the right regulatory structure in place to make that possible here in this state.
You know, we elect our leaders to represent us, and so if they aren't representing us, then it's time for us to put our foot down from that perspective too.
After the BP oil spill occurred, Kim Ross and other activists gathered at the Capitol for a special session to hear legislation put an end to offshore oil drilling.
The legislature came to town because they had to, because Governor Chris had called them. They talked about whether or not to talk about the pressing issues of that time. They decided not to, and then they went home. So it was a 45-minute session. Again, people from all over the state of Florida were there wanting to see change, wanting to see something different, wanting to see action taken. A lot of them were there for the first time and didn't, you know, they were incredibly depressed by this whole event. And so I said to them at the time, and I meant it, you know, this was a small battle. This was just a tiny bit to put a permanent moratorium on offshore drilling off the coast of Florida. That's tiny compared to everything that we need to do. We really, if we're going to get off of fossil fuels, we need to change our own personal habits. We need to change the focus of the country. We need to change the focus of the state.
It's going to take extraordinary cooperation. It's going to take extraordinary creativity. I think it's going to take a lot of flexibility, including from environmental leaders like myself.
Climate change and global warming is coming. It's going to be a question of how we adapt to it and how we prepare for it. In terms of doing research, we do need to do that research to figure out how fast. How soon is Miami going to be underwater is sort of one of the questions a lot of people. Are we going to have to rebuild our cities? And how are we going to pay for it? Are we going to just try and build higher seawalls? Are we going to pay for relocating our coastal cities? These are huge costs and huge policy decisions, and we need to get past the concept of whether it's happening to how we're going to deal with it.